How we doing, man?
Good. Doing well. I heard you have some Colorado State connections, so we might have a bit of an interesting head-to-head after this.
Yeah,
Nice
yeah,
little
we
55-50 basketball game to watch.
I know. Interesting matchup here for a playing game. Before we get on into all that, I want to introduce Mr. Limited. I'll let you say your own name because I don't want to dox you. If you want to share it, if you
Yeah.
don't, that's totally fine. But I've been a fan of your work on X, been following your stuff. Really good insights. I think we have a very similar mindset, so I'm happy to have you on the show. How you doing?
Yeah, doing great. No, yeah, as you said, I mean, I really appreciate the feedback I've gotten around some of the stuff. A lot of folks kind of know me as the account health guy. But college basketball is kind of my first love in betting. This is the first sport I've ever tried to bet. Like 10 years ago when I got into this, I was the guy who thought he could beat Vegas with just the KenPom numbers, and it turns out it's actually not particularly doable. So yeah, been betting this sport for a while, and March Madness is, I think this is always the busiest week of my year from a betting perspective. So super excited to talk about this stuff, and honestly, the account health stuff is great. Go read that. Obviously, go read all my stuff. But this is honestly more fun because we actually get to make some money instead of just throwing silly cover plays down. So
Yeah, for sure. And when you say account health, just in case anyone isn't familiar with that term, what he is alluding to is keeping your betting accounts active, right? I mean, more or less ways to increase the longevity, maybe disguise the quote unquote sharp action with different types of bets, right? From I'm sure parlays, round robins. I'm sure you have a whole list of things that have helped you out and other bettors. And it's something that, when I started betting in the legalized market, I never would have thought of, right? Like that's like the last thing you're worried about the numbers and maybe beating CLV and all that kind of stuff. And then, in the PPH market, it's been going on, but the legalized market, I think it definitely was something that at least I wasn't expecting to be as quick. And I know some were saying like, hey, this may happen when, the legalized markets hit the United States, but it is something that I think if you're winning money, you have to be aware of, right?
yeah, exactly. And the good news is, one of the best ways to preserve those accounts is just to bet your own stuff, right? Don't bet things that are obvious on odd screens. And so, hopefully, a lot of what we go into today, like a lot of what I talk about is originated plays. Even some of the stuff that I try to give out at the end, this isn't going to be stuff that you'll be able to find just by trying to steam chase an odd screen. So this is all good stuff.
Yeah.
Ideally for account health. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And before we hop on into the full discussion, guys, if you are watching this back on YouTube, drop a comment, drop a like, all the good things. You know how the videos go, hit that subscribe button, right? That's always my favorite.
Smash it.
Yeah, smash the button. And then
Smash it.
if you're watching live on Twitch, say what up in the chat. We'll do a little roll call here, see some familiar faces. We got a lot of Big Ten people like in our chats these days, which is always fun. So
All right.
football was really funny. We had
This will
some
do.
Michigan,
Yeah.
Ohio State fans. I mean, it was cordial, but it was funny with all the what's his name with the camera. I already forgot his name. The Connor
Oh,
something.
the Michigan dude, Connor, yeah,
Yeah,
whatever his name
yeah.
was.
That
Yeah.
that was that was good stuff.
I didn't even know you. It's funny. I didn't even know you couldn't like videotape teams. I just actually assumed that was legal until he got caught, and I was like, oh, I guess
Yeah,
that's not
I
legal. I don't
I,
know. I just like you would know the signals, right? I mean,
I
you
was
could see
kind of
them.
like on the like when
I don't
I
know.
heard that, I'm like, you can record, can't you? And then it's like, oh,
Yeah,
he did a practice, and I'm like, no, they're
yeah.
saying you
Well,
can't
that's bad,
record.
obviously,
Yeah, practice is bad, but
but yeah, but the games, like it's on TV, like you can,
yeah, so it's like, all right. Yeah, that was a whole weird situation. I want to
yeah,
bring up something before we hop on into our first topic here. You mentioned KenPom, and I agree with you. I think now it's almost impossible to like beat the market with KenPom numbers, especially when in my opinion, some of the square books are using KenPom to set their lines.
exactly.
Was there a
Yes.
time though that you maybe there was something to exploit there?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing I'll say which this like disclaimer will cover probably everything that we talk about, is at the end of the day that the NCAA tournament's a pretty small sample, right? So even if you've been winning for, a couple of years, I mean, we're only talking like a handful of games and probably, so I guess, where I'm getting at that, where I'm getting there is, in like 2014, 2015, 2016, I took KenPom as like, obviously I noticed a lot of the books were kind of following the KenPom numbers. So I tried to
Mhm.
find a bunch of the other projection systems, kind of take some sort of back tested weighted average of those to see if that could beat the market. That actually worked okay for a couple years. Definitely stopped working probably by around 2017, 2018. And again, I'm not sure if that was just getting lucky for 3 years or if that ever actually worked. I mean, it made sense to me in the sense that you
Mhm.
want to find certain spots where maybe KenPom is over here, but a bunch of other people are a little different. And just assume that books are sort of using the KenPom numbers and see if you can get an edge there. And we won some money for sure, but I think that was either a little bit lucky or and definitely a very fleeting edge. I mean, I don't think that's possible at this point to
Yeah.
take some average publicly available projections and beat the books. There's just too much. There's too many people betting this at this
Yeah.
point.
I
Too
I've
many
noticed
opinions in the
even
market
last
that are
year
smart.
last year is when I
Yeah.
really started to see, people on Twitter at the time, TikTok, like, saying, like, "Hey, here are the KenPom bets," and that's when I was like, "Okay, I think we're cooked here."
Yeah. once it hits TikTok, it's like pretty. It's over. Yeah, you
Exactly,
can.
it's done.
PSA to anybody watching. Yeah, the moment an edge is on TikTok, it's probably
Yeah,
not gonna
it's
be an edge.
kaput.
So yeah,
So, first half and team totals. I added team totals. I know you wanted to talk about first halves. I love
yeah,
first halves. I think the easiest way to kind of begin this conversation is first half unders. And I know that has been a thing. It really got popular. I would say last year is when I felt like it really
yep,
was mainstream. I started hitting that in the tournament probably 2 years ago, and I had pretty good success. I think I almost hit 60% 2 years ago. Last year, it was up and down. I think I had a stretch where, I went 0 and 5. I mean, that's gonna happen,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
But I think I was profitable still, and I know, like, the sports gambling podcast guys still do it, and they're probably gonna do it again this year. Let's start there. Do you think that edge is still out there? And if so, is there maybe another layer, as far as attacking it?
yeah. Can go into a lot of stuff there. So last year, or it was 2 years ago or last year. So they changed. I know there was a whole thing where they changed the basketball last year or 2 years
Mhm,
ago, and that was something that a lot of people were on. People are going to be on that again this year. I don't know how much the market has adjusted or is going to adjust, but for those who don't know what I'm talking about, this is like a thing that came out last year where there's a new Wilson ball that's different than the old one that they used, and apparently it was like a little harder to shoot with or something like that. And a lot of these first halves just flew under, and especially first halves where the team or the conference like never played with that particular
mm,
ball. So that was a thing last year. I am looking at that a bit this year. I mean, there may be a little bit of juice left to squeeze on that one, but I think like the last 2 years, a decent amount of it was that. But the second thing that I am seeing that I do think is real and the market hasn't adjusted to enough is when when they set these first half totals for college basketball, it's pretty formulaic, right? During the regular season, you'll see a total of like 140. The first
mhm,
half will be 65, second half will be 75. Like that's basically just what they do. Um, I have definitely had the belief, and I think this is a bit where you're coming from too, where it tends to be a bit more extreme in the tournament for a few reasons. And by extreme, I mean I think probably the first half should be set lower, and the second half should
mhm.
actually be set higher. So
Yeah,
maybe for a
especially on a
tournament total of
ratio
140,
percentage-wise. Yeah.
yeah, you may be looking at something closer to 63, 77.
Mhm,
Two reasons in each direction for that one. So, like, obviously, these are kids playing in an elimination game at an arena they've never played in before for the most part, right? And the theory is that this leads to a lot of first half jitters, shooting, or whatever it is, right? This is not a friendly environment for first half scoring, and the theory is maybe okay, maybe you get to halftime and they settle down a bit, the coach gets there, whatever. Um, and then also on the other side, on the second half side, right? Weirder things happen at the end of these games than in the regular season, right? So in the college basketball regular season, Like, yeah, like there are coaching tendencies of, okay, how often do they foul when they're down 8 with 30 seconds left
Mhm.
or down 9 with 30 seconds left? You got, a lot of sharp people track some of that stuff.
Which is
In
impressive
the
because
tournament,
I'm lazy sometimes and I don't
yeah,
even get that far.
yeah, exactly. That I think is a big, like, that's a regular season thing that a lot of people track. What's interesting about the tournament, right, is even if you have a coach tendency, right? So let's say, Rick Barnes, like, never, like, he just gives up when he's down 8 or
Yeah,
something with
yeah.
20 seconds left. Well, he might not in the tournament because it's an elimination. I mean, it's an elimination game, right?
Yep.
They're like going to keep fouling. I mean, like, you lose, you're done, right? So I mean, a lot
Exactly.
of
Yeah.
times people are going to keep fouling. This is not a regular season game in January. Or even if he tells the team to stop fouling, the kids out there might still do it. Like, they don't want to go
Yeah,
out, right?
this is
So
it. It could be their last ever game.
yeah, so it's interesting in the tournament where you just get a lot more of that stuff. Obviously, you get teams that get a lead and panic a bit and turn the ball over. This all leads to a lot more scoring at the end of tournament games. And the first thing I mentioned leads to less scoring at the start of tournament games. So I think you have a more extreme than the regular season split between what the first and the second half total should be.
Mhm.
I'll give you a good example. So I've already bet the Virginia Colorado State first half under 56, which is a hilarious number, but that's already ticked down to 55 in some spots, but the full game total from when I bet it is actually up half a point. So like,
That's
they're
funny.
starting,
Yeah.
like, people are
Yep.
starting to see this, and this is starting to become a thing.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely still some runway here for this one, and I plan on definitely hitting a decent amount of first half unders. But I will be a little bit more selective where I deploy that
Yeah.
this year.
It's a really interesting topic because I spoke with John Murray over at Superbook like 2 years ago about this, and he like knew about it, but he said we just
Yeah,
don't get enough action like that it's
yeah,
gonna move the needle, right? And that again, that was 2 years ago. But I think as soon as like maybe a rec book starts to see like just this increased ratio of bets on like first half unders versus full game unders, where a trader finally says like, guys, we have like more money on the first half under
yeah,
than we do. Maybe it gets there that year or this year. Maybe it's another tournament, but we're getting close to that point, right? Where it's like,
yeah.
okay, our eyes are actually on this now.
Yes, and there's a rec book down at 54 already tonight, and like that might not,
That's
56 to
low.
54 might not seem, but for a first half
Oh
total,
yeah.
and as you said, a pretty quote unquote illiquid market, like that's a move, that's a real move
Yeah. I
that
mean,
they're
even like a
taking. They've
123
really,
to 120, a 21 on a
yeah,
full game total, I'm like, okay. So on a first
yeah,
half with, half less possessions
yes,
theoretically or whatever,
2 points is a lot
it's
in a
it's a
Virginia
lot.
first half.
So kind of going off of
Yeah,
that, is there maybe an edge with like betting live at half on an over, kind of like the inverse thinking, or I guess it kind of depends what's
yeah.
happening in the game, right? Because it's a different game state.
Y Yeah, definitely. No, we can. I guess the last thing I'll say before I get into that is, in general, like, this is a framework that I'd apply. Like, if I like an under in the game, I usually just bet the first half under because I don't wanna
Mhm.
deal with the end of
The
game
fouls.
stuff. If
Yeah.
I like an
Yeah.
over, I just bet the full game over. So that's typically how I attack these markets.
Pretty good rule of
And yeah,
thumb, in my
the
opinion.
yeah, I would say, like, if you're kinda, like, newer at this or whatever, like, follow that rule of thumb this year. It's a little bit more fun. It's way more fun not having to deal with the fouls at the end of the game for sure.
Wait, you don't wanna
I can
sweat
tell you that.
out the last minute for
I
10 minutes?
I I mean
Uh,
stuff like teams who are down like 15 will decide that their only way to get back in the game is start fouling with like 3 minutes left,
oh,
right?
yeah.
Like this,
Yeah,
you
extend the
don't
game.
see this during the regular season, but you will see this during the tournament where
Mhm.
they're basically just like, "We this is our chance. Like, we're gonna do whatever we can."
Duke, 2 years
Um,
ago, I think it was Duke, maybe it was another team, but I remember they started pressing
yep,
around, like, 4 or 5 minutes, and it turned into, like, are we actually pressing or intentional fouling? And
yeah,
I don't think they even knew. It was just
yeah,
and then it started, so,
it, it's
um,
nuts.
so yeah, I Pick Six in the chat, he's been an OG here. He asked about that. So obviously game state, it's a little different, maybe more case by case.
Yep. Totally. So here's one thing I would look for. I will say I do less. So I usually head over to Vegas for the first round. I'm going again this year, which will be great. Leaving Thursday. So I do, like, in March Madness. I do a live betting is a little bit less of my action because I'm kind of there just watching the games. But there's definitely a few very basic things you can look at halftime.
Hmm.
And one, just to kind of address Pick Six's point here, if you notice that the first half is being played with solid tempo, right? So solid, and we'll get into this a little bit when we discuss just kind of totals in general. But the total is really derived from two things, right? Tempo, the pace of the game, and then just the actual shooting, like are the
Hmm.
shots going in, or the team shooting to their expectations. Um, and so for the second half over, right, what you really want to look for is a game that is being played with the at least the projected tempo of the game, like it's moving the way that you think the game's going to move. The KenPom site actually will have projected possessions for every game, and you can probably assume that many books are using that number for
Hmm.
their own projections. And so if you kind of see that the tempo is reasonable, it's just the teams are shooting bad. That's probably where I'd look to attack the second half over. Just really bad 3-point shooting variance in the first half, but at
Hmm.
a fast paced game is a really good spot. Um, where I don't love the second half over is obviously the opposite of that, right? If the game actually isn't being played that fast, but they're making shots. If a team is up by a lot, and there are certain teams, and I think I've written about this, there are definitely certain teams. This is where I'd really study the team tendencies, especially for these 1 and 2 seeds,
Hmm.
because there are some teams when they are up at halftime. So two things, right? If you're up by a lot, you're probably not going to get that end of game, wild situation,
Yeah.
right? So that's number one. And number two, like teams differ on their philosophies of do we want to run up the score or do we just want to like get this game over with and
Yeah.
end this? And that's I would if you're going to go into this with the plan of live betting, I would try and profile those 1 seeds, those 2 seeds, those teams that are likely to be up big at the half and decide what type of team is this? Are they gonna like just try to score 100?
Hmm.
Or are they basically like our job is to get this game over as quickly as possible and rest up for the next round? Because teams will definitely be slightly different in that philosophy.
Hmm. So, kind of going off of that, is there anything you can kind of take away with it being a neutral court versus your home away, your classic split there with teams? Maybe anything like to see how they played in neutral games before? Is it just too small of a sample size to try to like take anything away from what they did earlier in the season, which usually it's in November, which at this point is like 4 or 5
Yeah.
months ago?
No, that's a great question. I Everybody who tries to predict college basketball is going to have a slightly different opinion on this. I do look at the early season neutral courts probably more than you would expect. Um, I think it's just such a small sample, so it's really hard to derive anything from it.
Hmm.
But in terms of tempo, at least in terms of pace, if we're talking totals, I really want to see how a team plays against another team, maybe that has a very different tempo than them on a true neutral, right? On
Hmm.
like a court where there's not the home crowd is not going to influence which pace the game is played at. Those neutral samples are really precious for that reason, for
Hmm.
sure. And then I also do look at, if a team does do very poorly in a true neutral sort of early season tournament situation, like that can be interesting as well, especially if they have a sort of a history or that coach has a history of doing poorly in those situations.
Hmm.
Um, it is a small sample, but that's something I would consider, I think, probably more than most.
Yeah, and it adds
Um,
to the bigger picture, right? It's never
exactly.
you just take one thing and you apply it. You add that to the handicap, and I think I'm kind of like you. I've used a lot of those MTEs more, I think, than maybe the average handicapper, sharper, better. Just because too, those games are usually non-conference games, and this kind of will lead into the next topic here.
Yep.
We get so caught up, right, in the conference play, and sometimes there's just tendencies not only from the teams playing each other, but from the refs themselves too, that we get into this vacuum in this bubble of like how intra conference teams play against each other, and then we get into the
Yeah.
tournament, and that's when sometimes you just
Yeah.
see some. They feel like these crazy outliers and unexpected results, but maybe they shouldn't be as unexpected. So, can you dive a little bit deeper into what you mean by the conference correlation?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I wrote a little bit of I wrote a little piece on that. I think this is one thing I'll say. This is like kind of a more fun strategy. I wouldn't say this is any significant part of my action for the
Hmm.
tournament. And in fact, I hadn't looked at this for the last few years. Mostly, I was just prioritizing sort of other ways to bet it, and knew that this was, never going to be something that I got a ton of money down on. But with a little bit more time this year, I really wanted to look at it. So the theory here is, right, once you get to January, every team plays only teams within their own conference, right? So if you can kind of visualize what we know about teams, it turns into all these closed loops of like sections of teams playing each other and then never playing anybody outside that section, right? So
Mhm.
with 2 months of data on that, like our last 2 months of data on a team is only on that. So if there's ever an incorrect rating or incorrect bias or some sort of incorrect like ranking of a conference, it's not going to get solved in these 2 months. I mean, you're never going to know, right? Because they're
Mhm.
only playing teams against their own conference, and you can't really rank conferences against each other when only they're obviously not playing each other. And so that sort of got to this theory of, is there a way to sort of figure out maybe who's I mean, maybe you don't even really need to know the direction. You just need to know sort of the strength, the correlation between how these conference teams are going to perform, right?
Mhm.
So back in 2015, 2016, when I was doing a little bit of this, right, we basically just all decided, like, all right, the Big Ten is not good. We've decided they're not good. We're just going to parlay a bunch of money lines, a bunch of spreads against the Big Ten. If we're right, we're going to win money. I think we did pretty well that year on that one. But yeah, it's just kind of an interesting wrinkle in finding correlation where there may not obviously be correlation. And I think it's more interesting this year, right? Because there's a lot more props and stuff that you can parlay. So I
Mm.
think the game day guru guys and I were talking, and like they found a pretty solid edge to their model that was all like these Mountain West teams not to make the Sweet 16. That's sort of a fun way to bet this,
Yeah.
right? You can kind of fade. Like if you don't think the Big Ten's very good, you're probably going to find value on Nebraska, Wisconsin, Illinois to not make the Sweet 16 or to not make the Elite Eight. And these bets are now available, right, in a way
Mhm.
that they weren't available, even probably 2 years ago. And so I'm still kind of working through the math, but I want, I almost want there to be something there,
Yeah,
like,
it's
to be
it's
totally honest.
it's hard, right? Because you could back test it and then you can try to
Yeah.
apply it to the next year, but it's difficult, right? But I do remember back, I think it was 2012, maybe 2013, we were out in Vegas with my buddies and we were still in college, and one of my buddies did a Pac-12 parlay and I think 1 out of 8 teams hit. So that would have been
Yeah.
a good year to
Do the
to,
other way.
do
Yeah,
do the
exactly.
other way. So I definitely think there's something there. It's just hard sometimes, and with the Mountain West, we saw a few years back, right, where they didn't have a good showing, and there can be
Yep.
some over adjustment, under adjustment sometimes with some of these conferences. But I do think it's a good point to bring up and just to start thinking about, as we go through the tournament. So really good stuff there. Let's move on. I want to talk about
Yeah.
the futures and money line rollover. So first and foremost, are you a big futures better for the tournament?
Not as much. I definitely will throw in a few, but in general, a lot of my futures action is actually in sort of like contests or Calcuttas or
Yeah,
brackets and stuff like that. I find those like a little bit more fun than just betting like some team 20 to 1 to win the title,
when it's all or nothing type
because there's
deal.
like a little bit, yeah, there's a little bit more like yeah, action that you kind of get to sweat throughout the tournament with those Calcuttas and stuff. So I do have some decent. Oh, see, we got a first game,
So
first half one over.
what does that
We're
mean?
we're 0-1.
Yeah. Well, the
um,
next one has to hit, right?
yeah,
We're due, as
right.
the
We're
kids would
due.
say.
We're due. Yeah.
Yeah.
I unfortunately, since I don't have the game on, I can't tell you why it went over,
Yeah, I
what
wasn't
happened.
even
But
watching either.
yeah. But we yeah. So anyway, like I will have a decent amount of action, sort of empirically on futures, because I'll have these Calcuttas and some of
Mhm.
these large pool bracket. I do really like the large pool bracket contest too, because there's just it's a big field. There's a lot of game theory there. Like you can, I think, sort of have an edge and hope to hit a big score there.
Nice. So with the money line rollover, the question I wanted to ask you is, how do you kind of determine when you should bet the future up front versus the rollover? Are you simulating out the bracket with a computer model, or is it just kind of like you're looking potentially at maybe a team where you're like, I'm definitely lower on them. I think they might lose, and the team that I want to bet on, it may make more sense to not do that or to do the rollover.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I did want to talk about this because this is definitely a question that I've gotten. And I think what you just said is exactly right. I'll give a very simple. If anybody is kind of wondering whether to do this, like I like this team, should I just money line rollover or should I do a future? There's a very simple way to think about this. Is more of the reason that you want to bet this team because you are higher on the team, or is it because of their path? Right? It's probably, think about how much of the bet that you want to make is because of one of those two factors. If you're high on the team, just in and of itself, let's say,
Let's do an
let's go to the
example.
bracket. What's a good
Yeah.
example here? Oh, where's Kansas? Let's find Kansas because I
Yeah,
actually like that
Kansas
as a case
is
study here.
yeah,
'Cause
Kansas
they're in
is
Purdue's region.
was that
Yeah,
a
perfect.
what did
Okay,
that go for in Calcutta, based on like some of the other
I can't
4
remember.
seeds?
I gotta look up.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
fine.
it was the high. I don't no, it definitely wasn't the highest 4 6. I think
Yeah.
Auburn was,
So what is
but anyway,
40 to
so
1, I think, on
let's
Kansas?
yeah, but let's use Kansas as an example, right? Because there's a reason that you would be high on them, right? So they obviously are incredibly talented. They didn't play well down the stretch. They had a bunch of injuries. Now they're allegedly healthy. So if you're basically like, look, Kansas is being market rated as the 20th best team in the tournament, but I think they're a
Mhm.
top five team. And I have no other opinion on what else is going to happen in the bracket. I
Yeah.
just really like Kansas. That's when you'd want to do a money line rollover, right? Because basically what you're really saying is like every price that is going to be offered on a Kansas game, I think is going to be wrong because I'm
Mhm.
just way higher on them
Mhm.
than anybody else is. So you're just going to take money line, money line, money line, money line, because in theory, right, those are all going to be wrong. Now let's actually go the other direction and say, I kind of like Kansas. I don't love them. Like, I think they're solid, but Matt Painter and Rick Barnes are in this bracket, Purdue and Tennessee, and I just do not trust
Mhm.
them to do any. I mean, they might lose in the first round. They might
Yeah.
be out. So Kansas
Their
would
path
play
could be
Purdue in the Sweet
easier.
16.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you are really low on Purdue and you think, gosh, they can lose in the second round, like no problem here. Kansas might never have to play them. Tennessee might get knocked out. Kansas might never have to play them. Um, your price on the future, you're actually going to get a much better price on the future than the money line rollover in that case, right? So that's when
Gotcha.
you'd want to bet the future. And so a good example. So last year for UConn, right? I think they were
Mhm.
20 to 1 to win. I want to say
Yeah, that
if
sounds about
you'd
right.
done but their path, so I mean, obviously they were good, but their path opened up, and I think somebody did the math. If you'd done the money line rollover, you would have gotten like plus 680 versus the
Wow.
plus 2,000 future. So
Wow.
if you think the path is going to open up, like you're going to, I mean, you're going to get a much better price on the future if you are right about that path thing. Um,
Gotcha. That's pretty
the
practical.
problem
That
with
makes a lot
that
of sense.
yeah, the
Yeah.
problem with that is like the default, like if everything goes according to chalk, you are going to get a worse price on the future probably than the money
Mhm.
line rollover. Like it's a lower hold market, the money line.
Yeah.
So you're going to, if the bracket plays out exactly as planned, you're likely going to get a little bit extra EV just
Mhm.
doing the money line rollover. So I would really save that futures bet for kind of that chaos region, right? You're like, I
Mhm.
think this region is going to go, absolute chaos. This is the team I trust the most. That's sort of where using the future ticket is going to be your best bet there.
So as far as a chaos region goes, let's take a look at one. What do you think is the one that there's going to be a bunch of dominoes that fall?
Yeah, I mean these are always hard to predict. I
I always
did
miss them, man.
use I mean I did use Kansas as an example because I think that one could go
Yeah,
pretty
Rick
wacky.
Barnes, Purdue.
Um, Sneakily, one that people may not be on, that East region is really interesting in the sense that if UConn is doing a lot of work there to keep that not the chaos region, I would say.
Mhm.
If something happens to them, Iowa State has a team profile that is historically not great, right? The extremely imbalanced uh,
Yeah,
offense
offense isn't
defense.
great. Yeah.
Illinois is imbalanced in the exact other direction, right? So the two and the three are already like don't really fit your typical Final Four team
Mhm.
profile. BYU's lurking there as a pretty strong team, obviously. Auburn's lurking there as a pretty strong team. So, it could just be UConn, but man, if UConn manages to have a championship hangover and lose early or something, that one could get pretty nuts.
Yeah, there could be. I mean, San Diego State, I know a
Yeah,
popular pick to
obviously.
lose, or like UAB seems pretty trendy. Like, who knows? Maybe San Diego State
Yeah,
gets on a run again, and they would have to get past Auburn most likely. I just don't see Yale
yeah,
beating Auburn, but
yeah. I mean, an Auburn BYU Elite Eight would not. I would not bat an eye at that. That is totally reasonable from this region.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was looking at the region where I was trying to see, like, where there could be some upsets and teams falling apart. The West, maybe UNC is a really interesting case for me because I think when they're
yep,
playing out their best, they look really good. Guard plays there, defensively, they can make shots. But man, if somehow Mississippi State, which has been playing hot, they've got hot at the right time, if they can keep it up, that would be a really interesting matchup. They have to
yep.
get past Izzo first, and every time we think Izzo
Is
and
it?
Michigan
And
State
yeah,
shouldn't be in, then they end up winning.
yep,
So
yep. That's what
um,
they need.
yeah, let's keep going here. Let's talk about some actionable upsets and maybe just bets we like
Yeah.
in the opening rounds. Um, how is your card looking so far? Did you bet a lot of stuff early when the numbers came out, or are you kind of maybe 50-50 on getting in early versus the market kind of maturing?
Yeah, so I think most years I'm like maybe 30% of my actions in like by Sunday night or Monday morning, and then the 70, the remaining 70 is kind of this week. This year I actually expect it to be a bit closer to 50-50. Like I mean, this is kind of not surprising, but now that there's so much competition in the space, like a lot of books are opening lines as soon as they can. And that gives you a pretty solid opportunity as somebody who's at the screen Sunday night, and kind of has already done some work to bet. So I think it's going to be more like 50-50 this year. I got a lot more down Sunday than I expected. Um, Mostly just because, yeah, I mean, some of these openers, they open at multiple places. There are some pretty significant discrepancies. There were definitely some openers that I thought were very much incorrect. The
Mhm.
BYU is my first bet, so minus 7.5. I thought was a terrible number, and I think that is up to, I don't know, but it's not 7.5.
Well, first and
We've got
foremost, I mean, BYU should have been a 5 seed. The committee literally
yeah,
came out and said that because of
yes,
the Sunday rule.
yes,
So that's the start. And then
yes,
also Duquesne
yep.
basically is the VCU spot, right? So
Duquesne is not good, and
yeah.
they are should be like a 13 probably, and I think as you said, the committee just obviously got lazy and didn't bother to change anything when they beat VCU. So yeah, that was just a very weird opener on that one.
What about totals? Did
But yeah,
you
let's
fire on something early that you saw and you're just like,
yep.
this is off by 4 or 5 points?
Yeah, the Alabama Charleston over 168.5 existed for like 10 minutes. That was
Yeah.
not the right
I missed
number
I
there.
missed on that one. I was a little late on that one.
Um, yeah, I think the other one, UAB San Diego State, I think I have an over 136, maybe 135.5, 136. That one's gone way up. Um, yeah, there's a bunch of just mainline sides and totals. As you probably noticed, like I'm a better totals better. So the totals I have pretty solid CLV on. The
Mhm.
sides are a little bit more mixed. I think I've definitely
Yeah.
got a few sides wrong for sure. But totals in general, I think it's all about possessions for me. So
Mhm.
the market opens right. KenPom kind of opens his stuff. I run my stuff, and there's just a couple of these. So the Alabama game is a good example where I kind of see why the market line is what it is, and I
Yep.
look at the possessions number and I go, that is not the right. I mean, this is going to be played at a faster tempo, in my opinion, than that one. And so that's the bread and butter of my kind of like Sunday night opener strategy.
And it's funny with KenPom, and the book with the D and the K. um,
Yeah.
I noticed. I want to say it was February, but I don't even think they were like scraping it or they were like manually inputting it because there was a few instances where like you could tell they like fat fingered like
Oh,
the
that's
number.
funny.
Yeah, and then like I had this theory about KenPom and some of the square books, recreational books using KenPom,
Yep.
and then by February I was like, I'm 100% in on this. It's confirmed. Um,
Yep.
because I mean, at a certain point, I don't know when you caught on like officially. Was it last year or was it actually this year?
Oh, for like when they, you mean for rec books actually using them?
Yeah, yeah. If you actually do
Yeah,
believe
I
that.
think it's
Yeah.
been, I think it's been a couple years. I think, yeah, most of the market entrants for sure over the last year or two.
Yeah.
Legals have only been legal. I'm in Massachusetts, so this is only our first, or it actually launched about a year ago today.
Mhm.
So I wasn't looking at the rec legals like a ton before this. But yeah, I mean, last year at this time for sure.
I wanna ask you about one total, and then we'll talk about some upsets.
Yeah.
So this is when I got in early. I hit Gonzaga, McNeese State over 145. It's up to 149.5. I'm just curious what your
Oh,
numbers kinda say
that
about that
looks
one.
good. Yeah, let me pull that thing up
My
there. That
so the only thing I
Gonzaga.
was partly worried about with this one is it is at altitude. Um,
Yeah, where is
you know
that one? Is that a Salt Lake City?
Yeah, that's in Salt Lake City, but, at the
Uh,
same time, TCU
yeah,
Gonzaga
yeah,
last year, we all thought those Denver
yeah,
games were gonna go under, and I think
yep.
only one did. So,
Yeah, I'd have to look at that one. I don't think I had a position there. So the only yes, the I had that more. I do have that more like 146, but the reason for that, there's a little. I trust that McNeese is going to be able to. So McNeese is the slower team in that one.
mhm. Yep.
They definitely have shown a bit more of a tendency in these neutral games to make sure that they're slowing teams down. Small sample size, I happen to weight that a bit more, I think, than
Mhm.
most. I'm a bit more confident that McNeese might be able to play this game a bit slower than Gonzaga. So I'll basically, the way my action works is, right. I fire on, I think, the ones that I think are obviously off on Sunday, and then through this week, by the time I leave for Vegas, Thursday night, I'm going to have the rest of the stuff planned. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one to take a look at, to see if there's, if I think there's an opportunity to play back. I mean, look, obviously,
Yeah,
if you got
that's
a
what I was thinking.
it's a 149 right now. I mean, you've done a great job, right?
Yeah,
I don't, I think at first we got to trust the market,
for sure.
and only not trust it when there's a good reason not to. So that, if anything, that's looking like that might be a playback on the under for me.
Mhm.
But I haven't actually looked into the Salt Lake City as a venue yet. I'm actually, as we're streaming this, I'm like right in the middle of doing the rest of my venue stuff. So
Yeah. Did you get
there
the
could be a
Pittsburgh
reason that
yet?
these are getting. The Pittsburgh one I have looked at. The Spokane one is interesting. Those games are all getting steamed over. I actually have that potentially as a bit of an over one.
Mhm.
And it is interesting that all those have gotten steamed pretty hard from the open to the over. I think the St. Mary's game is there. That's the only one that hasn't been bet up.
Yeah, and
But
they play that at
Bama's
it's
there way
another
up.
arena, right? It's not at
Yes,
Gonzaga's.
it's not
Yeah.
Gonzaga's. Yeah, it's a different arena. But San Diego State got steamed up. Bama got steamed up. Auburn Yale, I actually liked the under on in the opener, but it was in Spokane, so I held off, and then it got steamed up too. So that made me think, like, yeah, maybe there's something.
Jeez.
Maybe there is something to this one,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I heard, I think it was from Kyle Hunter said that the Pittsburgh venue is a pretty good under spot. Is that
The
kinda line up with what you
that
see?
one is that one is in the small sample that we have, and yeah, I didn't see. Kyle is pretty good at this, so I didn't actually see him tweet that. But yes, in my independent research, there's it it has been home to some of the worst shooting tournament games we've seen in the
Yeah.
last 10 years.
One way or another, right? Like, is
Um,
there something there?
yeah,
Maybe, but
yeah.
could be, could be.
Here's another fun fact about the Pittsburgh one. Actually, let me find this game. So yeah, when you look at that venue, the first basketball game played in that venue, so it opened in 2010. So Pitt and Duquesne played like the City Classic or whatever
Mhm.
in the Pittsburgh venue. Final score of that game was 67-58 in double overtime. Just like an interesting first basketball game to have been
Gosh.
played in that arena.
One of the
If anybody's
hardest
interested
rims,
in
yeah,
those,
the first time they ever used those
yeah,
rims, maybe, I don't know.
first
Yeah.
first time use those rims. Yeah,
Jeez.
that's an interesting one. So yeah,
So
the Pittsburgh one's an under, I think, and the Spokane is the one that I've identified as potentially the over.
cool. So as far as just some upsets, and maybe some teams you were kinda targeting in Calcutta, maybe teams that are double digit, um, seeds here that could make a run to the Sweet 16 or maybe
Yep.
even further. What are a few that you had in mind?
Yeah, so usually when I'm looking for a first round upset, it's a little bit more about the favored team than the underdog team. I mean, there's obviously a lot of profiles of underdogs that people love to talk about. Good 3-point shooting, all this to maybe slow the game down or speed the game up. If the other team is uncomfortable with that. But I really like. Yeah, I see we got some Big Ten fans in here.
Yeah, they're everywhere, man.
I I really like to look at like the flaws of the good team when I'm picking the upsets, and so we'll go back. We just touched on this team, but Illinois is a really interesting one
Mm-hmm.
that I've already got a Moorhead State money line bet in the first round. So
Nice.
Illinois is really interesting, right? They have an extremely wide potential variety of outcomes based on
Mm-hmm.
how they play. Let me just pull up my Illinois stuff real quick.
I
So
think we have
the
another team in mind for me that's similar to
yeah.
Illinois, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah, and they definitely fit the profile of team that can definitely score 100 and win some games and potentially ride that shooting. But they are live to lose like to anybody at any time, and that's what I look for here. So these teams who obviously all of their skills on offense, right? So they're very very good at offense, but the defense is going to be barely in the top 100 adjusted, and if you just do the
Mhm.
raw efficiency without the adjustment for quality of opponent, I mean they're going to be a bottom half
Yeah.
of the
In the
entire
bracket.
country
Yep.
raw defensive team.
Yeah, of the whole
The other
country, not
thing
even
that
in the
yeah,
bracket.
oh no, yeah, the entire country. And the
Yeah.
other interesting thing too is like they're not as good at threes as you would maybe think given how much they score. Like this if this team gets down, and
Mhm.
this is where I like to look at the flaws of the good team and less so the 14 seed here, because all of these like 14 seeds or whatever that are in the tournament, like Morehead State, they're 35% 3-point shooting team. Like they can make they any given day, right? They can obviously make a bunch of threes and find themselves with the lead in the second half in this game. And what's really interesting about Illinois is they don't shoot threes incredibly well if they want to get back into the game. They also don't force any turnovers. They're almost dead last in the country at forcing turnovers. And so if you want to get back into the game, if you're Illinois and you're down, I'm not sure how you're going to do it. Like
Yeah.
if you don't get the other team to turn the ball over, and you don't make threes at an elite rate.
Yeah.
That's definitely one of those things that I look for if we're looking at teams that might lose early, because Illinois is really fits that profile. Another one that fits that profile. Some people might not be happy about this one.
Oh, can I guess it?
Creighton.
Oh, I was
Oh,
gonna I was gonna guess it.
you're gonna
That's
guess
that's
Creighton?
that's the
Yeah.
one. And
So
you know what? I
man,
have them going to the Final Four, by the way. Stuckey had a
I
post.
I
Did you see that?
yeah. Oh no, I didn't.
He basically was like, "What's a
What do
team
you what
that
do you
you
say?
have going to the Final Four that you think could lose in the first round?" And I was
Yes.
like, Creighton."
And by the way, like that's not those things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. A team that
Mhm.
might lose in the first round might also have a good chance of getting in the final four. I was actually, um, a couple of my friends are I think have an Illinois future, and I was actually saying, Illinois to win the title and Morehead State first round money line could potentially both be correct.
Yeah.
That's if you think about it,
It's funny to say, but
and
I
and
totally understand.
that's sort of how I feel about Creighton too. So Creighton is better at threes, but they
Mhm.
are once again do not force turnovers. They don't get to the line, so that's sort of the other one, right? Like, how do you come back if you're down in the
Yeah.
second half? Well, forcing turnovers is probably a big one. And then you either got to make threes or you got to get to the line. And if a team is like pretty bad at one of those two things, in addition to turning the other team over, the path to coming back when the bad seed kind of starts out hot and hits a bunch of threes, the path to come back is just that much narrower. I mean,
Mhm.
you compare that with like a UConn or one of the truly elite teams like who have no problem turning other
Yeah.
teams over and shooting
Mhm.
threes. Okay, let's say the 16 seed has the first half of their life, you still feel pretty good about
Right.
one of these elite teams actually
And and on top
being
of
able to
that
come back and get themselves back in the game.
too, that Akron game is in Pittsburgh. So
Yep.
maybe it's a lower scoring game. And
That.
also, what is Akron to
Yep.
Pittsburgh's? What is that, like 2 hours?
That can't be too far. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
that's an
they
interesting
kind of got
one for
screwed
sure.
there. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know, man. Creighton just gives me bad vibes, man, where I'm like, do I
Yeah,
want to put them in my Final Four? And look, I'm in a few bracket pools. It's nothing like high stakes, but it sucks to have, and same with Calcutta. Like, you don't want your
yep.
team that you spent some money on to lose in the first round. That's kind of worst case scenario.
Yeah, but if we scare enough people off Creighton, that means you have leverage over the field. So we're
Yeah,
we're
there we
doing what
go.
we can here for you. Yeah, exactly.
And you were saying with these bigger pools, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't want to take like UConn to win it all, right?
No, yeah, you definitely want to get diverse in the champion and the final four slots, right? So
Mhm.
where a lot of people go wrong in these big pools, right, is they want that safety, right? So they pick UConn to win because they're like, well, I want to like have the champion, obviously.
Mhm.
And then they decide that they're going to be different in the first round. So they're going to pick Akron over Creighton. They're going to
Yep.
pick Morehead State over Illinois. They're going to pick all these things. And these just don't get you that many points, right? And also, you basically have to hit the exact parlay so perfectly,
Right.
even if you do it, even if you want to.
You have no leverage
And
to the
then
field.
UConn
Yeah.
also has to win too. Like they're not
Yeah, in the
always
finals.
going to
Yeah.
win. To be clear, and so yeah, it's just not really the right way to differentiate yourself. The best way to differentiate yourself in these larger pools is later. So you do want to go chalkier than you think early, and you want to go more different than you think late when
Mhm.
those kind of points really matter. And be okay with having a champion that is maybe a Creighton that, a lot of people are going to be like, man, I don't want my, because like really what you're arbitraging here is like the feelings of your opponents here, right? A lot
Right.
of people are going to approach this and say, I don't want my champion out in the first round.
Mhm.
Well, if you're in a large bracket pool, it actually doesn't matter if your champion is either out in the first round or out in the final four. You're not going to win it if you don't have the champion. It doesn't actually matter when they lose.
Yeah,
you're
and
just you're just not going to win the thing.
depending on how big it
Um,
is, it doesn't really matter if
yeah,
you're like top 50, like congrats,
yeah,
but you're playing to
yeah.
win this. It's kind of like the whole
You're playing to win the thing.
GPP DFS mindset
Yeah,
from a game theory perspective, right? Like, who cares if you're dead last? I mean, actually, that being dead last is pretty hard to do in some of those pools, but if you're in the bottom
it
10%, it's like whatever,
doesn't
at
matter.
least you
Yeah.
diversified and you're
So
not tied near the top and not win. Yeah.
yeah, no, exactly. But a lot of the field isn't going to think that way, right? They're going to feel stupid if they finish in the bottom 10%. So they're going to like protect against that, right? They're going to be like, well, I don't want to pick
Hmm.
this team to win that might lose in the first round and all this stuff. And that's exactly your lane to attack, right? You should be picking a champion that is like obviously you think can win, but obviously there's maybe some questions and a final four that's reasonable, but you don't think anybody
Hmm.
else is gonna, really many other people are gonna have.
So
Is kind of where you want to
let's
attack
talk
these.
about kind of your favorite to win. Do you even have a future on a few like that you put in before the
Um,
tournament?
yeah, so I've got Auburn. I've got a Kansas. So I think those two,
Auburn,
as I
I
kind of
like
mentioned,
that.
being high on, yeah. So Auburn and Kansas, kind of being high on those two. One bet I have is actually I have a four seed to win. I think I put that in at
Mm.
DraftKings.
So we
Um,
got Kansas,
just I think there's a
Alabama.
decent, yeah. Bama's another one of those teams, the Illinois Cretans that we're talking about. Obviously,
Duke,
they can
dude.
go out immediately
It's like
to
it seems like
anybody.
the jury's been out on Duke, but I mean, they still
Yeah,
McCain and even
Duke,
dude, I think Powers is gonna he wait, is it Sean Powers, right? The backup. I think he's gonna
Oh,
see some minutes too. He's the
Power,
like
TJ. Yeah,
power. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
TJ Power. That's right.
TJ Power. Yeah,
Yeah. Who knows?
yeah. I mean, I think they have to. I don't think Filipowski can. I mean, Filipowski just got bullied by DJ Burns, so I don't know what he's going to do against Zach Edey. So they might have to throw some more bodies around. But yeah, no, I mean, I obviously like Duke. Duke's a very balanced team. They're really solid here. Auburn is a really good team. Obviously the best four seed. And Bama is definitely one of those that does not typically fit the profile of a champion. But they're kind of that
Streaky.
high variance team. And Kansas is really interesting, right? So Kansas, you gotta really trust the non-con body of work if you're a Kansas fan here, right? You basically
Mhm.
have to say, look, none of what mattered the last 2 months really matters here. We
Right.
beat Tennessee on a neutral. We beat UConn. We beat who else they beat here? It was just those two. They lost to Marquette. That's right. Yeah. So you basically have to say, look, that's who we are. We're a top preseason top 5 team. That's who we are. What we did in the last month didn't matter. So we have a ton of talent. This is sort of we can kind of now we're healthy and can go on a run. And that's a profile of team that I kind of like. Interestingly enough, UConn last year, remember they slipped to a 4 seed, right? This wasn't like some
Mhm.
1 seed that everybody thought was obviously going to win the title. They had a great non-con, okay conference play, and then it turned out that who they were in the non-conference is really who they were.
Mhm.
And if you're a Kansas better or a Kansas fan, you got to be hoping the same thing here. That's really who we are.
Yeah, Kansas is really interesting. Is that line still sitting around like 7.5?
Yeah, I got it at 7.5. I think it's 8
Yeah.
now.
It
I
it
would
did
I would
give
bet
that
it at
up,
8.
but
I
yeah,
would I can give that out as a best bet right now. If it's still 8, I would
let's
go hit
take a look.
that.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with
Um,
that too, man, because
yeah, I
it's
like
just
Kansas a lot
the
here.
market is just so down on Kansas.
Let's see
It's
what we
weird. It
got.
feels weird, right? I mean, Bill Self and
Oh, there's some 7 in it. Oh, whoa, we're down to we're moving back down. Uh-oh.
hmm.
Maybe I'm the idiot. Well, we'll find out.
Well, you don't have to give that one out
I,
officially, like as your best
yeah,
best quote unquote best bet, but yeah, bookmaker has it at 7, man. That's an interesting one.
I see a couple
I
7s
wonder if
hanging.
people are actually kind of high on Sanford. I haven't watched them play as much, but I talked to a few
Yeah,
people and they said they're actually not a half bad team.
yeah,
And yeah,
yeah.
injuries
I
on
just
Kansas, we're aware, but they should have everyone back, I thought.
Yeah. So that's the issue. If there is injury information that we don't know, this is where maybe as like an individual kind of
Ooh,
better, like if you're not like a betting syndicate, there you go. The color ruled out.
there you go.
See, so I'm
See, it's my
bag
fault for
holding the
having you on
Kansas seven
stream,
and a half.
you know?
Yeah, there you go.
We miss
No, but
we
that's
miss
what I was
these
saying
moves.
actually. Like if you I did like Kansas. I projected they'd play. Obviously I'm wrong sometimes here. This is one spot though that if you're a just guy betting and not like part of a syndicate, not like
Yeah.
this isn't your job or anything. Maybe these are the types of games where you just got to understand like people are going to have the injury information before you do.
Yeah.
And so, hey, as one of my early positions that I'm taking a shot with, like Kansas 7.5, fine, whatever.
Mhm.
McCullough gets ruled out, he gets ruled out. But yeah, it's just a good reason to with these injury games say I would not make this your strongest position if you don't have a really good injury guy or a really good injury
For
information,
sure.
right? Because that's
Yeah.
actually could sort of get hurt here,
Yeah.
like we like
Um,
we might have just done with Kansas.
I know. Well, Macaulay does hurt. They just don't have a lot of depth this year,
I
which
mean, I
is
think
tough, but
Dickinson's more important,
yeah.
but oh, he's out for the whole thing 20
McCall
minutes ago.
Wow. So McCullough is.
I guess I'm glad I didn't go Kansas in the Calcutta. All right, well,
I was
that's not
talking
good for my
to
4 seed to win bet.
Kelly in
Oh
Vegas and
boy,
her Calcutta. They have
yeah.
Kansas. But I think they got him at a decent price, but I
Oh,
mean still it's like that's tough. But you know what? What was
oh,
the year a few years ago when Villanova guy got hurt
yeah.
and they kept winning? I mean, it can happen. It just doesn't feel good to start the tournament that way with
That's
someone
that's a
out.
tough one.
Wow. Well, sorry to break the news here live.
All right, so we just lost. So we just we just lost our first half under, and like I'm talking about Kansas right as their players get hurt. This is a great start. We
Well, do you want
should
to talk about
hopefully the rest
Virginia
of this
here?
game. I so here's what I will say in this Virginia game. So obviously we have the first half under on this one. Most of what I've researched and looked at, and this should probably not be a surprise to anybody, shows that Colorado State is probably the valuable side here.
Mhm.
I will not be betting it. I'll be setting this one out, obviously on the side. I'm invested enough with just my Virginia fandom, so I'll just be rooting for EVA. But that first half under, if you can find a 55.5 or a 55, I would still take that one. This is a really good sort of spot to play that.
I like it a lot too, and I'm a Colorado guy. I've watched a lot of the Rams and the Buffs, of course, and CSU
Yep.
will kind of play to their opponent tempo wise. There's been some games where
Yes.
I've seen them pick up the pace, and I've been on the wrong side of that. But then I think with this Virginia matchup, we're going to see a lot of passing around the perimeter. We know Virginia's tough in the paint, and then I think we're gonna get a lot of like high screen and rolls with Isaiah Stevens with like 10 seconds left on the shot clock. I expect that to happen pretty much the whole game. So
Yep.
hopefully that clock is just ticking, ticking, draining, and not a lot of possessions in the first half. So I like that actually.
Yeah, and based on what you said, like that's what we're looking for with these tempo things, right? So Colorado State is a bit more of a chameleon, like as I call them.
Mm.
They'll play up and down to teams' tempo, and that's sort of what you want to look at with these matchups, right? So Colorado State played Wright State to 76 possessions. They play Air Force to 61 possessions. That's a really
There you go.
high split. Virginia, on the
Yeah.
other hand, I don't think Virginia's played a 70 possession game in 2 years now, or something like that. I looked at this a while ago,
what
but yeah,
what
they're not going to let you play your tempo. Like they're gonna, Virginia's gonna basically say
so
this is
I
what's
was
gonna
looking at
happen in this
Virginia
basketball game.
with their home road splits, and it seemed like on the road they have more possessions, but is that just because they're behind and they have no choice to speed it
Yeah,
up?
we got blown out on the road like pretty much every game this year. So I think the possession, and that's the other thing you got to do with these possession games, right? You definitely have to discount like the last 10 minutes. I actually throw some of those possession numbers out when the game is
Mm,
just totally out of hand
yeah,
in the
they're
second half because
extremes, right?
it's not basketball. Like it's not really something you can really learn for how the game is likely to
Yeah.
go, especially a game with a 2.5 point spread. So yeah, a lot of our road, let me actually just pull it up real quick, but a lot of our road games were just, I mean, yeah, this one against Virginia Tech, like in Wake Forest and Memphis, like
Mhm.
we weren't even in it in the
Oh, I
second half.
remember that
So
Wake Forest one, man. I think I had the over.
those you usually just, those I usually almost just toss. Um,
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to handicapping a small spread game.
So I gotta hop off here in a few minutes, but I do wanna say one
Yep.
thing, for a best bet. I do like Nevada quite a bit.
Yep.
That's one that I circled. I think there's a few reasons why. I mean, they're favored as the 10. That's always interesting to begin with, but I think it's a good location spot for them. It's at higher altitude. Reno is basically at the same altitude as Salt Lake City. It's funny though. I bet the money line at minus 125, and I was expecting this to creep up to, I don't know, maybe minus 150. It actually went the other way. Do you know anyone who's betting that, or maybe as to why that's moving that way?
I'm on Nevada. I haven't seen any reason for the move.
Yeah,
Let me see
just
what I'm looking at.
kind of weird. I was expecting like I placed I think 7 bets Sunday, and that was the only one that
I'm
moved
in
against me. So
yeah, although I don't think I think I might have bet that one yesterday. I'm in a -1 on Nevada. Yeah, I think it's still
okay,
there.
that's probably the best
Yeah,
number at this
you know,
point,
I
minus one.
I like him.
Yeah,
I like Nevada here. Dayton has some issues, and as you, I think we said at the very start, like we might be at the rock bottom here for the Mountain West valuation. I
yeah.
don't mind taking a shot with some of these teams.
Let's hope the Mountain West comes through because if not, I don't
Yep,
know how they're going to be able to overcome this in years moving forward as far as like how the committee
yep.
views them. Any other bets that you wanted to talk about before we hop off here that you placed?
Yeah, if you guys want a fun one that fits both the venue and the basketball system of teams who don't use the ball, the Creighton Akron under, as we just mentioned, is just firing on all cylinders with like everything that you look at and sort of the fun thing. So
Okay.
neither teams use the ball. The conferences didn't use the ball, and it's in Pittsburgh, this incredible under venue. So if you
Yeah,
kind of
it's
want to place
crossing out all the
a massive system play, Creighton
yeah,
Akron under is
right.
kind of a fun one.
Yeah, system
I've
play,
got the
right?
first half under. I've got the full game under on that one. One other one that I would like to mention, though, I'm probably going to be on an island on this one, but I like South Carolina -1 against Oregon quite a bit here, and I think there's a lot of folks who love Oregon. Oregon's going to be very popular. This is not. This is really not a good Oregon team. Dana Altman is doing all the work here on this handicap, right? Like everybody's betting Oregon. Dana Altman, Dana Altman, Dana Altman. He's
Mhm.
so good. We might lose because Dan Altman is that good. But South Carolina, just in everything that I like to look at, significantly better. Should be a significantly better tournament team than Oregon. So I might be on an island there, but I'll go down with my ship if I have to. But I really like South Carolina in this spot.
So I picked Oregon just in my bracket in the first round, and
Yep.
then I don't have either team or don't have Oregon advancing. But one thing that I was thinking about just last night was Dante, of course, and he's looked great in the tournament, in the Pac-12 tournament.
Yes.
But he does get in foul trouble. I've seen it many
Yes.
times. If he gets in foul trouble, that may be like I'm live betting South Carolina. I don't care if it's like 3 or
Yep.
4. That's one in particular, because if he's out, that whole offense just turns into chucking threes. And I think we looked at it last
Yep.
night. Oregon's like 18 for, I want to say it was 80 from 3 in their last like 5 games. It's like
Yes.
23%. So they're not hitting threes. If they're not hitting threes, I mean, and Dante gets in foul trouble, like that's a tough go. So
Yeah,
I think
they're
you're onto
not
something
particularly
there.
great from the line either. And then Dante is really key here. And if you look at Oregon's non-conference, Dante was out, I believe, for all of it, so that you can't entirely just look at Oregon's body of work without Dante, because he is such a key piece.
Mm-hmm.
But they are a really small team too when he's out. It just like if Dante's in foul trouble, this is not a top 100 team in the country.
Last
By any
thing
stretch
here,
of imagination.
55 on that first half under.
That's
You still play it?
55 minus 110 is the last I would play this one at.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, awesome, man. That was a really good discussion.
Absolutely.
Best of luck with your bets in Vegas. Where are you staying at, and where are you going to be watching the games?
Usually over at kind of the Planet Hollywood Cosmo area. We'll be watching some games at the sports bar there Friday, at Top Golf Saturday. Top Golf's always great out there because they have the screens like
Nice.
all the way
Yeah.
like out where you're heading, and you can see them. So that'll be really good.
Take your anger
And
out
yeah,
on a
so
first
that'll
half
be
under and try to break a screen or
exactly.
something. Yeah.
Should have a good group. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
know a
fun
few
in.
people in the chat might be in Vegas or whatever. So if you want to link up with them, maybe
Perfect.
they hit you up in the DMs and figure that out from there.
Be at Top
I'm
Golf Saturday.
jealous.
Come say hi.
Cool, man. Well, have fun. I put your X handle. It's funny. Literally, the URL says Twitter still, and it's like
I know.
I'm trying my best to say X, but then it's like, guys, like Elon, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
So that's a
I
story
just
for
say
another
Twitter.
day.
Yeah, I can't. But
Cool.
All right. Well,
All right,
thanks for
man.
having me on, man. This is awesome.
Yeah,
Glad to
this
get to
was
talk
really
some
good,
hoops.
man. And I'm gonna be watching it back just because I know we touched on a lot of good points, and it's actionable stuff you guys can use for March Madness. Best of luck to your Cavaliers. May the best team win, I guess.
May there be 40 points scored in the first half.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's
All
do
right.
this.
We'll see you later.